please. Let me make sure all members are present. All members are present, and we did hold a meeting 2 weeks ago. Can I get approval of those minutes, please? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed for the minutes? No? Okay. So we're moving on to one new piece of legislation, authorizing the Director of Public Safety through the Office of the Purchasing Agent to enter into a contract without the formality of publicly advertising for bids with Gray Shift Gray Key Online for hardware to bypass passcode security on Apple devices and declare an emergency. And we have Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Charlie Brown with us today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. This is used to bypass the passcodes for secure Apple devices. Again, will be used to gather evidence used in serious criminal investigations, and we'll entertain your questions. To my left is Sergeant Sheffield. He actually works in that unit, so if you have any questions between the two of us, we'll answer those.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions from committee members, please? Councilwoman Sims, please.
I have several, if I'm allowed to continue.
Yep, sure, go ahead and start.
So I'd assume that there's some protocol for usage of this technology. Like, can you kind of walk me through?
So wait a second. Let me ask, let me clarify your question first, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean. As far as, go ahead, I cut you off, but go ahead, or he cut you off.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, to clarify, get more information about what your question is.
So you can go ahead. What's your question to me?
Okay.
Red or green? All right, so the device would only be used when we had proper legal process. So it would either be a search warrant, consent from the victim, or consent because it was found property. So it would be installed in my office. Myself and one other person would only have access, and it would only be used, again, with the proper legal authority.
So when you say found property, so you walk in on a crime scene and there's an unattended iPhone, you can...
This is specifically for iPhones. And yes, so say your house had been broken into and you come home and there's an iPhone laying on your countertop, that's not your iPhone, that would be found property. We would then want to investigate the information inside that phone to see who it belonged to. So it could either be stolen or it could be the bad guys.
So the probable cause for looking at that would be what?
Well, that would be found property. It's not yours, it was in your house, so we would have to either determine who it belonged to, would have to look inside of it, so that would be found property.
So I guess there's just lots of question around a technology like this, and I think rightfully so, because you know, your phones aren't your phones from 5 years ago. They have all kind of information on them and access them. So using this technology, how often would this contract allow us to, like how many phones are we talking about?
This is for as many times as we could use it in the 1 year term. So it would depend on how many phones that we collected. That would be one we had the legal authority to enter and that are supported by the device.
So we have unlimited use. Is this on one single desktop, or is it?
It would be installed in one office. It can't be moved from that office or it won't work the way the company sets up the software and the hardware.
So I'm not familiar with your role, but is there just one person or there's several people who have access to the use of the technology? It would be just
myself and Detective French, who works in the same unit as I do.
So on average, how many, annually, how many times do we need to get into a phone where a defendant has not given permission or provided a passcode?
Right now, we've been borrowing this service from BCI and other police departments who have it. We have 20 phones that are running, plugged in, waiting to be cracked. We have about 15 phones waiting to be done. We just don't have a place to set them up, because after the phone gets put into a stage where it'll then process to unlock, they have to be plugged in and powered on. So we have 15 phones waiting right now because we don't have the place to store them once they're going. And I don't know how many it goes. As it goes right now, Apple iPhones are about 40% of the smartphone product that are out there in hands of people. Most people keep their iPhones longer than they keep other phones because they're a little more expensive. So the support for the device is more reasonable, I think, than we get with some of the other phones.
So what's the time frame for cracking a code, say, on average?
If we can get the phone before it's been powered off, we can recover about 95% of the information at that point. If the phone has been powered off or we want to continue the unlock process, it can take from 1 to 13,000 days.
So just from the ones that you all have had to do, what's the average time frame has it taken to get a passcode?
Well, we've got the 15 phones that are still running, so we're waiting for those unlocked, and we've had about 10 to 15 phones that we have had unlocked successfully.
And those started about how long ago?
Those fell in that 4 to 90 day mark.
4 to 90. How long has this technology been out?
About 2 years, a year and a half, this particular company.
So it's one sole...
There are 2 companies that provide a service such as this. Cellebrite, who is the main tool that we use, but theirs is a per use, which is, it averages about $2,400. You have to send the phone to them. We've done it once for a homicide. We waited for about a 9-month return to actually get the phone back unlocked. Where this is, again, it is more expensive on the offset, but it gives us as many uses as we can have in that year. Plus, we can also support other jurisdictions nearby, again, with the proper legal authority.
So for the last 2 years, you all have been using this technology, but from some
We've been borrowing it. I've driven to Youngstown and Parma dozens of times.
So just from you all's guesstimation or just researching it, have we found anywhere in the country where they're using this technology where it's been abused in any way?
I don't know any specific of anything being abused. Everything can be abused somewhere.
Surely.
Normally, people who are in my position and who handle this type of thing are expected to be a little more responsible for it. But as I can tell you, the federal services use it. Ohio BCI has the technology, and other local departments, including sheriff's departments, have it.
So once you, kind of maybe you can walk me through. So once you have the code and upload it to whatever the desktop is, does that leave the phone open and vulnerable, or once you've gotten the code, can you no longer access the phone? How does that work?
If we can receive the code, then we have the code to unlock the phone, and then it accesses the data that's stored inside. Once you have the code, it doesn't damage the phone, if that's what you're asking. But it's to get the code back, to get the data.
Okay. So you guys have been using this for 2 years, right?
We've been borrowing it.
Borrowing for 2 years.
Had access to it for about over a year now, yes.
So do we have any, can you share with me probably kind of like what kind of cases you've used it for?
We've used it for homicide cases. Most recently, we used it in regards to a string of serial bank robbers. The data from the phone put them at the scene of the crimes within feet. I would say that our location accuracy is.
Well, I'm going to stop. It's important for us to not reveal too much information about sources and methods. Sources of investigations and methods of investigations, because what we do is when we do that, we teach the audience, we teach the bad people. We don't want to give that much information out.
So I can appreciate that, Mr.
Thank you.
Chief. But also I want to appreciate that this is a serious matter, I think, as it relates to our Fourth Amendment rights.
And that's why it's...
And so, you know, I had never heard that we've used the technology before, so this, unlike body-worn cameras, I was fully aware of that. We were kind of informed of that process, so I didn't know we were even using that. I do remember a high-profile case where Apple was asked to provide a code, and they refused, and they hired some hackers to come in and to assist with that. But I had no idea that we were using that technology. So it does, for me, as a member of this body, open some concerns relative to the Fourth Amendment rights.
Right, and those, the sergeant mentioned that there's a requirement for either consent or a search warrant in order to get into that device.
So the way we've used consent and search warrants before technology seemed a little different. I don't know if it changes, we go to court, they determine there's probable cause for you to review the phone. Is that the same procedure?
Yeah, and the judge would sign a search warrant.
And it limits you to look for specific things?
The search warrant affidavit will talk about why you believe, articulable facts as to why you think that this information is where it is at the time, and it also gives us what we can look for.
So I'm not as familiar with it as you are, Chief Brown, so I thank you. But so when you ask to review the phone, do you say we're looking for data related to a bank robbery that happened on such and such a day? Or are we saying, maybe too detailed, but from what I read with the technology, it just uploads everything. It doesn't discriminate, it just takes in everything. Is that correct?
And that question can answer that.
Correct. When we get the information, we have to pull all the information at once. That's where I would follow the rule of the search warrant. I am not directly involved with the investigation. So if the search warrant says only to look for things related to A, B, and C, then I can only look for things related to A, B, and C, and then I would only give those to the detective who's handling the case. They don't have access to the rest of the data that comes out.
So, okay, that leads me to this question. So is the data now a public record or a protected record related to an investigation? So if I had a public records request, could I get whatever you pulled from the phone?
It would be evidence. It's tagged into evidence. So it would be whatever the rules of the court. You obviously wouldn't have access to it until after the case has been disposed of.
And the search warrant can also be sealed.
The search warrant would be,
Can be sealed.
can be or automatically is.
The request was made from the person who is the affiant can make that request.
So the defendant can make a request that, who I didn't hear what you said.
The affiant, the person who's making application for the search warrant.
Oh, okay. So,
Councilwoman, let me see if there's any other council members that have questions, and we can come back to you, just out of respect. Any other council members on the committee? Do you have any other concerns or questions? Okay, no. Oh, Councilwoman Keith, please.
Can you tell me, does this expedite us getting information by not borrowing and by having it ourselves? I'm going to imagine so, but I just...
Sure, your imagination is correct. It does help us. The sergeant talked about 90 days for a homicide to get the information returned. It makes us more effective and efficient to do it with our own
And it's
hardware.
done in-house with just 2 people that have access with 1 computer in a locked office. Correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions, comments? All right, I'll come back to, let me see if any other committee members, council members have questions. Any other, Councilwoman Amobian, please? And then we'll come back to Councilwoman Sims. Just out of...
I do understand what you are doing. I think I do. Question. And I know a lot of people, and I'm not really sure if we've done this or not, have we modified our policy to expressly speak to, because this is a very sensitive area, that everybody thinks that whatever is on the phones is, fair play or fair game or whatever. Have we modified our policy to speak to, we get the information, what we do with, what we don't need for the investigation? I'm just curious as to if we've been real detailed about how we handle everything that you get.
So the information that I generate is specifically what is either requested or restricted by the search warrant. Or if it's consent, it's the information the detective is handling. I expressly go through that items that I know obviously aren't related, you know, people have personal photos, they're a little more personal than others. I don't include those that don't have any relevance. They're in the extraction. If there's some reason they become of note, we could retrieve those because we still have them. When that data comes out, it's not something, the information I get out, I couldn't give to you, and you wouldn't, without some sophisticated tools, you couldn't do anything with it until I ran it through some other software and presented something in a readable format. So it's secure at that point.
Well, my question has more to do with how we revised our policy to reflect the sensitivity of that.
Councilman Willoughby, the court is really engaged in this. So we have to make application for a search warrant to get the information, so a judge signs off on all the search warrants.
Yeah, I do understand that. Do we have a policy that speaks to this? Can anybody tell me?
Specifically, no. I've been doing this job for 10 years, and I don't think anyone's come across and there's been an issue.
And we don't need one? I'm just curious. Do we need one?
No, I think it's the matter is referred to the court. The court signs, the judge signs a search warrant, and that allows us to make the search.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Hoke, and then I'll come back to Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would imagine with everything that has been done in previous to this, I mean, we're just looking at getting this process for ourselves. So the process has already been there. We've been working through the state, and have we had to go to federal or anything, or just the state BCI in order to use this process? And we're using it with other law enforcement agencies in order to get the information now. Is that correct?
The federal agents have just started purchasing the same product. I know the IRS in Cleveland has it. The FBI, I'm not sure where their status is yet. And we have been using it in conjunction, having access to it through the state and through PARMA, the other local jurisdiction.
Okay. And so, in essence, all the questions about legality or the process of it being allowed to be used has already been answered, as far as anything through there. I mean, if it's been in process and we've been doing it for a couple years, then, and it's not just the city of Akron that's looking at this process, it's nationwide. I would imagine this process has already gone through all of the legalities and been proven that you're allowed to do it.
Correct. We follow the Constitution.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, the information is also reviewed by the prosecutor to limit it down. When it actually goes to court, they only enter in the very specific items they want.
Yes.
They don't enter in everything that.
Right, yeah, all the information on that or anything is specifics for that particular case.
Correct.
Whether it's, and if it's to, find out, or, try somebody on a homicide or drug issues, selling or anything like that, then.
In the 10 years that I've been doing the computer forensics, I've never been to a suppression hearing to suppress any of the evidence we've collected. So I would assume what we've been doing has been legal for the last 10 years.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what my thoughts were. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. I'll go to Councilwoman Sims again, and then I got a comment to make, and we'll go from there.
So with all due respect, in your position to 10 years, this is a technology we just began using 2 years ago. Is that not correct?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
I said this is a technology we just began using 2 years ago. Is that not correct?
We've been extracting data from cell phones for the last 10 years since I've been in the position, and I know it had started several years prior to that. Smartphones have only been around since 2007, and then the data collected from cell phones before that was fairly limited. So I'm not sure of your question. This particular tool has only been around for about 2 years.
So it is a tool we haven't used prior to 2 years ago?
We have not had it. I have had to go borrow and have access to it at other jurisdictions.
So in reference to the protocol that was inquired about earlier, about how we store the data. I understand that from a legal standpoint, we have approval from the judge to search and seize, but how we are handling data internally. As I mentioned before, my understanding is that a large volume of information, I think you said that you screen and some certain information doesn't reach investigatory officers, and I appreciate that. But again, is the data, is it now a public record? Can I request it? If you say no.
For my understanding, what I generate is tagged into evidence. It doesn't go to any records place, it's evidence. After the case is dismissed, I've seen local documentaries come in and ask to see things from old solved or unsolved homicides. So I assume that old evidence can be reviewed, if that's your question. But that's, again, that's legality. That's way above me.
So I appreciate your indulgence, and I hope you appreciate mine. The issue at hand is a very serious matter. Because the phone is not just your everyday phone, people's whole lives are on the phone, and what happens to that data is people's whole lives are on the phone, and what happens to that data is important. And so I don't think the line of questioning, I understand not wanting to go into detail about your investigation practices, but having a protocol and a plan for how we handle that data, I think is important, and I hope that we have that. If not, perhaps that's something we need to look at. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions or comments? All right, I just want to say I support this. Obviously, I am concerned about a criminal hiding their private, not hiding their intentions on what they've done or what they're doing. So I'm behind this 100%. And if it's our major crimes like homicides and bank robberies and stuff like that, I'm 100% on board with this. So with that, the committee, do you have a recommendation? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that it's a question of whether we support making sure that our safety forces have the resources that they need to do their jobs effectively and as expeditiously as possible. I think the only challenge before us, realistically, as a body who represents the residents of the city, is to ensure that the data, because it's to new technology, is handled in a way that it preserves the rights of those folks who are impacted by its use. And so I don't think it is in question at all that anybody, particularly me, does not support making sure they have the resources, but that is a paramount concern to me, how we preserve that data. So thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, I'm going to call for a vote, or call for a question. What would you guys like to do? What's your
Suspension of the rules, please.
I have a motion. I have a motion and a second. I have to take a vote first,
Is there any
please.
particular reason why it couldn't go on?
All in
consent agenda?
favor? Aye. Anybody opposed?
I'll
Can I do a
abstain.
roll call, clerk, please? Can you do a roll call? And then if we have a question, we can take it.
There we go. I'm sorry. Kamer.
Yes. Aye.
Keith. Swirsky.
Yes.
Sims.
Abstain.
Hoke.
All
Okay,
right,
thank you.
Before we adjourn, Councilwoman Sims, please.
Mr. Chairman, I just don't understand why it was necessary to put this on a fast track. It could have actually gone on a consent where I could have had more opportunity to even have some discourse in a private way, so we weren't so public about
All right.
so that I feel that we did our due diligence. This is a very serious matter.
Councilwoman,
Technology.
this is a very serious matter. Our legislation was emailed to us on Friday and uploaded into our iPads. And this is a sensitive matter that could have been discussed over the weekend or through email or
Sir?
in a telephone conversation.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know who I'm calling on Saturday, about legislation I get on Friday. And I'm not quite sure I would be satisfied with that anyway. I'm just saying that there was nothing here that should have precluded that this needed to go on a fast track. And if you would have given, just the consent would have given us an additional week to even have some additional conversation with folks who know this technology firsthand.
Correct.
So,
On the first-
that's all
Right.
that was all
And
I was
at
asking.
the end of the first line, it says, "and declare an emergency." Then it's up to us
All of our legislation
to-
says that, Mr. Chairman.
Exactly.
And we also always ask and say, well, what is so I can understand if there was this matter before us
Okay.
that was urgent, that we needed to push this out. There's none. A week would have given us the satisfaction of doing our due diligence. That's what I believe. So
Okay.
with all due respect, I wish we would have asked for it to place on consent agenda.
Well-
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And moving forward, what I'll do is I'll ask Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Charlie Brown, and the administration if there's anything else that might come before us that's sensitive, maybe let Holly or Sarah know to let the Public Safety Committee know that, and maybe we can address that through emails or telephone calls. I appreciate that. With that, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Parks and Rec. No, it wasn't.
All right, we're running behind. We're gonna move right into the Parks and Recreation meeting. We have only 3 members here today. Myself, Councilman Freeman, 3 members, hold on, and Councilwoman Sims. The 2 that are missing is Councilman Neal and Councilwoman Mosley Samples. And you're going to have to help me out, Mr. Clerk. I know there was a meeting last week, but it was only a presentation, correct?
Right,
So there's no minutes to approve?
we do have some minutes.
I do have a minutes to approve. Let me get those real quick. Yes, sorry, Mr. Freeman, yes.
That's
go
right.
ahead.
Thank you for taking care of the.
No, go ahead. That's why you said that over there. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Go
That's all
ahead.
right. I walked in late. All right, you did approve the minutes from the last meeting? No. Okay, a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Motion and a second. All in favor, let me know by saying aye. All right, very good. We have one article or one piece of legislation before us here, and this is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Neighborhood Assistance or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts with the Northeast Ohio Basketball Association for the management, promotion, and operation of the Drew Joyce Classic and declaring an emergency. Mr. Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, and members of the Parks and Recreation Committee. This ordinance would enter into a contract with Northeast Ohio Basketball Association for the management promotion of the Drew Joyce Classic Basketball Tournament. This is going to be year 14 already. The event will take place in late April throughout gyms throughout Summit County and adjacent counties. This year, the request is for $35,000, the same as 2018. And with that, if there's any questions, I can gladly answer them.
Mr. Valley, do any other communities participate financially?
I am not aware of that.
Okay, thank you. And this was the same amount from last year?
That's correct.
All right. I know we've discussed before in the past, I don't recall, economic impact on the community. I'm not sure how many hundreds of people come in for this, but...
Well, last year, we had 407 teams that participated, and they come from all over the country into the city of Akron, and the economic impact was $3.3 million.
Okay, very good, thank you. Other questions or comments, please? What would be your pleasure?
Consent agenda would be fine.
Oh, Ms. Amobian.
Sorry, I thought you were addressing the committee first. Last year, the request was for $50,000. We gave $35,000. Now, I speak with the mayor, and the mayor told me that he was going to get the additional $15,000, so I thought it was brought up to $50,000 last year. So I think we need to address that. But the concern that I have is that we have maintained the other activities that we have provided support to at the same levels that we have for a number of years. Are we reducing any of those?
I can only speak to this one right now.
Yeah.
I'm not quite
Are we
sure what you're
reducing the
talking
soapbox
about.
derby or any of the other ones that we're supporting?
That would be a question for the finance department or
Does anybody know?
chief of staff.
So specific to that, the Derby, my understanding, remains the same. We are looking at, there's another program that John and Rec put together at through the CYO that we're looking at reducing because of budget situations this year. I think it's important to note, and John would have these figures better than I, that the $35,000 grant to the Drew Joyce is the cash grant. But there are several $1,000s in overtime, staff time, and others that go into the total amount that we provide in terms of support to Drew Joyce. We've also, over the years, had to reduce at the Akron Racers as they have pared down their operations at Firestone Stadium. So there have been several other things that over time have fluctuated in our level of support, but I would defer to John in terms of the staff time and the overtime that we, the city, incur as a cost both for staff and for police, but I do believe it's substantial.
We spent staffing and overtime from the Recreation Bureau. We spent almost $13,000 in 2018. And also some of that, there was some additional in-house on some of our community centers and some of our community learning center gymnasiums.
Do you know what the figures were in prior years in terms of the in-kind?
In 2017, our manpower costs were almost $17,000. But I want council to remember, in 2018, that was the first year that LeBron James' name was not associated with the tournament. It was the first year that it was the Drew Joyce Shooting Stars Classics, and his numbers were down a little bit. We normally have about 550 to 575 teams, and I believe I said that last year we had 407. So with the significantly reduced amount of teams that came in, that reduced our staffing.
The other piece of that, John, as well, just to offer, Mr. Chairman and Councilwoman, is that the tournament had a female component that no longer is in existence. So our higher funding amount was at a time when there was a female component to the tournament that no longer is part of the tournament. We adjusted our cash support for the program.
So this is the amount that Mr. Joyce is requesting, 35, or did he request 50?
I don't believe I ever recalled seeing a request from him on this. And I met with Chief of Staff James Hardy on several issues that would be coming into the Department of Neighborhood Assistance early on, and this was the same amount that we
Let me
supported
just,
last year.
I just want to leave us, make sure that I'm real clear. Last year, when we made this decision to go from 50,000 to 35,000, I raised concern, and that's without knowing about the LeBron. I knew LeBron was no longer with it because I know he had removed his name, but to me, that's more reason why the 50,000 would be needed, personally. But one of the things that we need to do here, we talk about trying to increase the opportunities for minorities to do business in the city of Akron with our support. And then when it comes time for us to give support, we find reasons not to. I would imagine, and I don't know this to be true, and you can certainly correct me if you have the information, that at the time we were giving in-kind support close to $20,000, we were also given cash support in $50,000. Am I correct, the prior years?
In previous years, that is
Okay.
correct.
So my real concern is we say one thing and then we end up doing something else. When I talk to Mr. Joyce, the program that he is running and the resources and the economic opportunities that benefit the city of Akron, it's still substantial. A $50,000 contribution is a drop in the bucket in my estimation. But this still continues to be the concern that I have, is that we say we want to do certain things, but when it comes time to monitor and display what we're actually doing, it's totally different. And $50,000, and the mayor indicated to me, and I can call him and see if he found the $15,000 that he was going to find last year, which he promised me he would, that we should be looking at those ways of supporting this kind of economic opportunity for a major, not only is he a major person in this community in terms of the economic impact that this program is having, Mr. Joy's reputation, I think everybody knows, it precedes all of this in terms of people will be rallying around trying to get into his program. So I don't understand why we can't give him the $50,000 contribution toward what he is asking us to do. Again, I want to go on record as being opposed to the $35,000 and requesting the $50,000, and would like to know if the $15,000 that the mayor promised last year was found and given to Mr. Joyce as was promised.
So,
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond. Councilwoman Roman, I completely respect and understand your opinion about Mr. Joyce, the tournament, its impact, and that's completely understood and respected. I respectfully disagree that you're raising an equity argument here when there are literally hundreds of requests a year that come from community organizations across the city for monetary support for their recreation opportunities. John's group, we review them, as he said, we go through them with the available resources that we have. The Drew Joyce Shooting Stars Classic is one of the largest grants that the city does as it relates to recreation support. It's not the largest, but it's one of the largest. We then additionally, the $13,000 that John is talking about, I don't believe involves the money that we spend as a city for police overtime as part of making that event possible. We can get those numbers, but that number would then jump up. We are happy to continue supporting this program, but the reasons that we have reduced it, and I'll take, as John said, he brings them to me, we look at them, we go through them as it relates to the budget. It's a smaller tournament than it once was. There is no longer a female component to the tournament. There is less going on than there was when LeBron James had his name attached to it. That's understandable. So we adjusted based on what the needs were and what we could do in our budget. It was not a situation where I'm saying one thing or we're saying one thing at council and doing another. There were legitimate reasons why we adjusted the budget. I respect your opinion about it should be 50. We can take a look at that. But we didn't reduce Mr. Joyce because of any other reason than he has a smaller tournament than he once had. We have to look at all of the range of requests that we get at the city and make adjustments. And we thought that we could make an adjustment on the level of tournament he's now providing, which is no doubt important, but it is not as large as it once was. So the $50,000 plus the in-kind that we were doing when LeBron was attached and there was a female component to the tournament made sense. Those two things are gone now, and so we adjusted accordingly. That's why we did it. But I totally understand and respect that you feel strongly about this. I just want to be clear that there's no intent to be unfair or give unequal treatment to Mr. Joyce. There was a change in his actual tournament that necessitated, in my opinion, in our opinion, a reflection in how we budget the support for recreation across the city.
Mr. Chairman, I respond. With all due respect, Mr. Hardy, whether we do this intentionally or not, it is viewed the same way. And let me just speak to, there's no other African American who is representing a recreational program like this at the economic impact of this program that I'm aware of, and if I'm mistaken, please share with me that there is another program like this. Soapbox Derby, I know, has a long history with this city, and I know that if we ever gave it up, somebody would be jumping on an opportunity to do this. But we have maintained at $60,000 or more for Soapbox Derby for years. And if there's a program in this town that is capable of raising its own money with the kind of leadership that they have and the folks that sit around that table, it's the Soapbox Derby. They are quite capable of raising $60,000 or more. Part of my concern is, and I will continue to voice this, we should be able to generate $50,000 to support this program at the level of impact it's having. And the fact that LeBron is no longer with the program is more reason why we ought to be giving him some additional assistance to rebuild or add on to the program that he once had. So all I'm saying to you is that however we want to describe this or talk about it, it amounts to the same thing that you have found out in your Elevate Akron report. We continually find ways to justify not providing the adequate support of African American ventures by stating whatever we want to state. And for me, I totally disagree with it. And as I stated, if there's ever a program in this city that can find all the resources they need, it's the Soapbox Derby. And I don't mind us participating and supporting it, but I disagree that we should be reducing the money to support this program in light of the financial impact it's having on this city.
So we will be happy to take a look at those others, specifically the Soapbox Derby, and if your position is to take money from there and move it other places, we can look at that. But I just, again, in all due respect, there are a lot of people of all colors, faiths, and backgrounds who put these budgets together, and we do the best job we possibly can with no malice of intent. And we will continue to try and find as balanced an approach as we possibly can to fund all of the requests that come through for support.
Mr. Kamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just don't understand why we're having this debate when we had this debate 1 year ago, when the same piece of legislation came in, and we were provided attendance numbers, economic impact numbers. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to speak for him, but the chairman of this committee was not in supportive of the $50,000 to give to this association. I support the $35,000. I also would support $50,000, but is there any match? Is there any businesses that we could ask Mr. Joyce to reach out to for commitment before we go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money? Mr. Valley?
I am not aware of any.
Okay. So before I end, Mr. Chairman, thank you, but I don't understand why we're continuing this debate when we had a whole 1 year that we could have worked with the administration to try to find that additional money. But all suddenly, the legislation comes in today, and we're debating it about $15,000 when we could have worked for a whole entire 12 months to find that additional money. Thank you.
Ms. Moby.
I think anytime there's legislation to come before the body, we can debate it and discuss it. And just because you don't know what's been happening behind the scenes, it doesn't mean that discussions haven't been had. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Sims?
How many floors are we using that belongs to APS?
I'd have to get you that information.
Do you
Quite a
think
few.
I know we're
Quite a
probably
few.
using all of the high schools and probably some,
All the larger gyms.
the larger gyms. So do you know how many teams we're anticipating this year?
Don't know. We probably won't have a real good idea until middle of April.
So last year was 3.3. Do we do 3.3 million in ACAPAC?
That is
Is that what you said,
correct.
3.3?
That is correct.
Just, does Drew provide you any projections for this year? No?
He does not. He sends out his email blast and his social media and things like that. We really don't get a true count of teams. I mean, it changes daily, especially that last week.
So you don't, even for our, here locally, do you know if we're using our hotels downtown or East End or?
I believe they are using every hotel, not only in Akron and Summit County, but the adjacent counties also.
Including the ones downtown?
Yes.
Thank you.
Your questions or comments? Mr. Kamen?
Just going to make a motion to suspend the rules if we need to move forward.
Consent agenda would have been fine. That's what I asked for earlier, but if
What would your
council
motion
sees
be?
fit for suspension of the rules, that's fine also.
Okay. Motion for consent, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Let me go back to his, you made original motion to suspend the rules. I'm sorry.
Yes, I did.
Okay, I need to go
So
with that.
I think we have to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion to suspend the rules. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll see that that's passed out this evening. And with that, we have no other items to come before us. Thank you.
In a hurry? We're never on time, so why are you upset? Next, we have rules.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
They're both the same.
Delaney, Killarney. Are you in relation to any of the
All
Delaney's over
comes
in Kenmore?
before P.
You in relation to any of the Delaney's in Kenmore? Okay. Yeah, there's some Delaney's over in Kenmore. Yeah. Hey, if they don't walk with a limp, they're not related to me in West Virginia. Walk around the side of the hills, you can pretty sure. So it's fairly peaceful the other day.
Whenever you're ready.
I'd like to call the Rules Committee to order. The members of the committee are in attendance. Let me make sure I have everyone. I do. Okay. And so we're all in attendance, and I'd like a motion for the minutes from our previous meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, our minutes pass.
It's freezing.
We're going to keep the one piece on time that we have on the old agenda. So,
Temporary time?
temporary, no, time,
Okay.
okay. Full time.
Or refer.
Refer, okay. And
Okay.
now I'd like to go to our new piece, which is a resolution urging the United States government to immediately take appropriate steps to assist in the unification of Ireland and declaring an emergency. Okay, is there anyone from the law department that would like to speak on that at all? If not, you all have the resolution right in front of you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Yes.
Yes,
What is-
Councilwoman Amobian.
What is going on in Ireland that's different than what's been happening for years?
There's a definite separation in Ireland. If you read through the resolution here, there's a definite separation, and we're just asking for them to come to an agreement and unification.
Yeah, I read that, but I'm just asking, does anybody know? Because the northern part of Ireland has always had a problem with, the part Belfast and that part has been fighting within the country for years. What is going on now? Does anybody know?
Councilman Kilby?
Well, it's a really long, drawn-out process. It's been going on probably 400 years, but Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom right now, and it was settled mostly by Scottish people that moved over there that, you've heard Scotch-Irish. That's where that term comes from, and it's not really religious, but the cultures are different. The Scotch-Irish are Protestant, the Irish are Catholic. So it's, and I'm not sure what the demographics are. It's probably, I know the people with the money are usually the Scotch-Irish, and the Irish are the working class people over there. They've been fighting for many years about this. If you go back 30 years ago, it was a bloody civil war, basically, and it seems like it's calmed down, and I'm not really familiar with this, what was it, the Good Friday Agreement, but I don't know what's going to happen over there, if they probably should have a vote, whether to unite Northern Ireland with Ireland. I don't know what the demographics are, whether it would pass or not, but it sounds like Great Britain is holding it up, and I support if they entered into an agreement, even if it was 20 years ago, they should honor that agreement and have a vote or whatever, but I'd hate to stir things up over there and get them fighting again, but I support this resolution.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I visited the country in 2006. I'm very much familiar with that history. And, no, I just want to know if anything immediate was happening.
Well, right now, if it's probably the last, no, but if you leave whereas, the very last whereas, the British government has not held a poll or referendum on a united Ireland at any time during the 20-year period. So this is to promote that we do this, that we urge them to do this, not that we do this. So I believe since the Good Friday happened, they've kind of been in a limbo. Okay? So we are asking, especially at this time of year, that this come together.
Yeah, the only thing I could tell you, in 2006, things were very quiet. I went to the northern part, the southern part, and they were doing much better than they had been doing for years. So I didn't know if anything had happened that I was
There's
asleep
just hope
on.
there's more that can be done peacefully.
Well,
Madam Chair, you have some people coming tonight from the Hibernians,
Yes.
as well as Mr. Zavarillo, who's supporting this. So,
Our experts will be in the House tonight, okay? Yes, Councilwoman Sims. Oh, was there anyone else from?
I would yield to
Okay, thank you very much for yielding.
Thank you, Mr. Pesco. Madam Chair, is the 2000, I wasn't here in 13, but they referenced 2013. Will that help us with this?
Yes.
Okay. I asked her to pull it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Fusco?
Just for me, at least, in terms of the first sentence, urging the United States government to immediately take appropriate steps to assist in unification. That for me, it's just basically, and this is nothing new for us as a council, what we have done time and time again is ask the federal government to assist in a number of different fronts, and this is just one of them.
Thank you. Anyone else on the committee? Okay, Councilwoman Sims?
So I don't think it's the issue of that we haven't done this before, is that this was new to me. I mean, I didn't really know much about it, and we got it on Friday, and then we really didn't have an opportunity to have a discussion. I thought someone would be here to kind of help me better to understand, so what I know what I'm approving.
Sure, absolutely.
So
And they
that
will
would have
be
been
here
helpful.
tonight.
So I don't think it's an issue of whether we've done it before or not done it before. It's just understanding what it is. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry,
Given,
Councilman
no,
Freeman.
I'd like to make a motion for favorable report, given time of year that we're in, and that we have a holiday coming up. I think this is very timely, coincides on the calendar with St. Patrick's Day, so.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be up for suspension of the rules this evening. Is there anything else to come before the Rules Committee? Hearing and seeing none, we are adjourned.
Utilities and,
Utilities is next.
2 minutes?
Whenever you're ready, sir.
He had,
What do you want? You doing budget finance?
am I on? I'm not on.
Utilities is that.
You're on everything.